then it was in April of the next year that he actually got an interview scheduled.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know how long it's taking now, but that was
Yeah.
like,
Now yeah, it's not supposed to, I mean, in normal circumstances, it generally definitely does not take that long. I mean, once you have the petition approved and the case is transferred, you're looking at, depending on which embassy, and that's another thing which is really important too, because each embassy has its own set of rules. Ethiopia will have one different than Brazil, then different than Mexico. I mean, every embassy has like their own set of how the person goes and does their medical, or when they do it, or when they do their biometrics, or how they get scheduled for it. So it's really important that you have to follow the instructions on every single embassy that you go through the process with it. But typically, to get an interview from the time it gets approved is, I mean, should not be no more than 2 months
So
max.
mine,
yeah.
normally for the embassy appointment, do the couples go together or are they always separated, or does it change depending on the embassy?
Right. So most of the time, it's just the beneficiary that goes. There are certain circumstances where if the petitioner wants to go, then you can contact the embassy, privately, and ask them, whether or not you can attend. Sometimes they'll tell you, no, this is only for the beneficiary. So it really just depends on which embassy that you're dealing with. But for sure, the beneficiary is the one that has to go with it.
And even
But
if it can't be inside together, does it make a difference whether or not like they're seen like walking in? Would you recommend for your couples to attempt it?
Well, every case is a little bit different, right? So it also depends on the amount of evidence, if and the expenses involved, right? So, like in their case, they have a child. I mean, he would go in with the biographic, documents of that. She wouldn't have to attend. The documents speak of itself. You know what I'm saying? But if you're
yeah, actually, that's
situations,
what I wanted to ask about that. Sorry to
no,
interrupt.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, so I did go up to the door with them, right? And then we were there with Avi, and we just thought, like, what the hell, we could try. And they were like, oh no. And I was like, oh, well, who will watch the baby, if he's doing his interview? And they were like, well, either you bring him or you don't bring him the baby. Like, they were not very, not friendly, but they were just like, whatever, we got a million people to see, so we don't really care about your baby. So he didn't end up bringing the baby in. I was torn about that. Like, should he bring it in because that will like elicit sympathy and, whatever. But at the same time, what if he gets nervous trying to take care of our son while the, officer is asking him like, what's, his birthday, and messes it up because of that?
And that's a really good question. And I get that a lot when it comes to even interviews in the United States, right? Whether or not, should I bring my baby? Should I bring my child? And I always let them know, this can be a, stressful, anxiety induced situation. And if you're not going to be able to focus because, the baby is being a baby, for your own peace of mind and your own focus, I would encourage for the child not to come. You know what I mean? There's never been a
Yeah.
situation where the officer is going to be like, well, bring me your child. Let me see if you really have it. If anything, they'll request a DNA test, or, they'll verify a certified birth certificate. But to physically bring the baby who's just a baby, and it can be very, stressful, I don't necessarily recommend it.
Yeah, I mean, I was nervous for Vinny, like very nervous for the interview portion of it, and we kept like role playing like I was the immigration officer, and then it'd be like, what's my birthday? And then he's dyslexic, so he would mix the numbers up, and then I would be like, denied. And so we did that with like a lot. We recorded it. It was like it's hilarious, but I was nervous that he would potentially just, I mean, it's also like you would maybe mess up a number, mess up a date, but then there's also like you're nervous in the interview, so they ask you a question, like you blank. It's like taking an exam. I mean, I wonder, like consular officers or immigration officers, they have to kind of keep that in mind, right? That people are nervous because it's a scary thing.
Yeah, they do. And I have spoken to a lot of consular officers before, and they're, you know, trained professionals in these types of situations. But it is a pretty cutthroat position that they're in when it comes to approving and denying not only non-immigrant, you know, K-1 visas, but even spousal visas as well, that they have to go through. But definitely preparation is key, especially in this process. I mean, you know, people joke about it, how much they go back and forth with testing each other and whatnot. But I promise you, when even when you're there, that muscle memory will kick in, and it's good that you keep practicing it.
Yeah, well, it's funny because Vinny said that when he went for his interview, like the entire time he was like saying in his mind, like he's not good at remembering dates, so he was just saying like 12, 17, 19, 12, 17, 19, 12, 17, 19, like over and over and over again. And I was like, don't mix them up.
Besides the birthday, what do you think was the hardest questions that you guys received as a couple? Well,
Uh,
particularly Vinny.
I think that okay, so, oh, all right, so the, then there was the interview for the green card. So we were both there for that. And it says it requests on the paper, right, that, you know, you should both be present. I think the hardest question, I mean, I don't know if it's the hardest question, but I feel like for someone, it could be like a little bit of a trick question. Those questions they ask at the end where it's like, have you ever, you know, been involved with drugs or terrorism or, you know, because like, if English isn't your first language, you might kind of be like, huh? Like if you have a good lawyer, your lawyer would tell you, right? It's just say no. Everything is no. But but yeah, I think like that's sort of tricky. Our um our officer seemed really nice, and that kind of scared me too because I was like, oh, like oh, she asked if Winnie has been working in the U.S. But she didn't ask it in a direct way. And so I was like, oh no, this is a chance that like this could go bad, you know.
But it didn't.
He handled it.
There you go. Yeah, they do ask the trick question at the end, on the 485, if you have ever been, you know, committed a crime that you were not even arrested for, you know, and there's the one politician that responds, well, you know, if I've jaywalked, do I say yes to jaywalking? You know, it's like everything that you could possibly do to know whether or not it's a crime or not. Have you done it? So a lot of those questions can be a little bit tricky if you don't understand what the purpose of those questions are or what they're trying to get from you.
So have you like, do you generally like do these mock interview type
Oh,
things?
I do prep interviews, yeah.
Yeah. So like, do
And you know
you,
what? Let me
yeah.
tell you something. The officers appreciate that because when I go to the interview with my client, I tell the officer up front, I have gone over all of these questions with my client before, so they understand how to answer it. And they love it. The officers love it because they'll ask the applicant, did your lawyer go over this? And they'll say, yes, we go over all of the questions because they
But
have to understand, you know, what it is that they're answering. You know how it is when you go to the interview, you raise your right hand, you swear you're telling the truth, and then from that second forward, everything that comes out of your mouth is in some shape, way, or form going to be used against you. So
And it changes the mindset of the client even because you don't think of these things. Like for example, you had a great prep a while ago where the couple got stuck because you were explaining, you know, what side of the bed do you sleep on? Now, is it the left side when you're laying on it, or is it the left side when you're facing it? So if you say
mm,
opposite ends based on perspective, there you have contradicting, you know, answers. Or even your toothbrush. Do you know what color your toothbrush is?
I change my toothbrush all the time, so
that's the right answer.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and again, at the end of the day, you know, it doesn't necessarily matter even what side you sleep on or what color is your toothbrush. It's as long as, you know, you understand how to answer what is being asked. And I think that that's like the most important thing.
You know, it's funny because the interview I had with Vinny, you know, in the U.S. for the green card was one thing, but I'm reminding everyone I was previously married to an Argentinian man named Leandro, who's featured very prominently in 90 Day Fiancé. He's good. We're still very good friends. When we went for his interview for his green card at the U.S. Embassy in Argentina in Buenos Aires, like I remember I was allowed to go in, and you know, we went in. I brought like hundreds of photos that I had, you know, would take. I don't like taking pictures that much, which I know is kind of ironic, but I just, the whole entire relationship, I was taking pictures, specifically with, you know, one day we might need this. And when we went in for the interview, I remember the consular officer, she would ask a question and I would immediately answer. She would she said, "Can you please be quiet? You know, I need him to answer." And I was embarrassed, but I understood why.
That could have indirectly obviously helped the case, because when they see an excited petitioner, that definitely, you know, is able to substantiate your intent of bringing him to the United States. So, you know, like I said, there's a lot of control when it comes to, or a lot of, you know, authority that comes with the consular officers on what they're able to control over there. So, but it sounds like you went well. It went well because he got his residency, right?
You did. That was like, you know, that day, it was so exciting. Um, it's just like a crazy feeling. Like it doesn't, I don't know. I guess I'm not sure if people in other countries, like if an American moves to certain other countries, if they'd ever get that same feeling. I feel like we just make the process so complicated, or maybe not. Maybe I just don't know enough about other countries' immigration laws, but it's just so thrilling. Like it's one of the happiest days of my life also when I saw Vinny got his green card, because it's like, it's freedom, you know?
Yes. I mean, other countries, they're, you know, they definitely have their own set of laws. There are some countries that you can be born in and you'll never get their citizenship. You know, that
Yeah.
you'll always be a resident of where your parents are born in. So definitely there are challenging laws all over the world when it comes to migration. But the U.S. immigration laws are probably one of the toughest. And coupled with the very long wait times and long processing times, I think that's what makes it so stressful. It's that, okay, why do things have to wait so long for things to actually happen? But it's just part of the process.
So I want to know, like, what's your, maybe this is a difficult one to answer because you have a lot of stories, but like, what's your craziest interview story? Are you allowed to tell me? But
I mean, I have had quite a few. You know, I went to an interview where, you know, it gets crazy when not that I'm not prepared, but when not all of the facts are properly disclosed to me. Okay. After, you know, even after all of the begging for transparency and, you know, how, you know, give me all the information. At the end of the day, you know, when I get blindsided, it's can be very nerve wracking. So I was blindsided on an interview where the petitioner had been arrested for like 15 years, didn't tell anybody about it, didn't disclose it, and it turned into a complete meltdown at the interview because the officer disclosed it to the applicant at the interview that their spouse had been incarcerated for that long. So it was just, for lack of a better word, a complete shit show. You know, so and then there are other interviews where I've been disclosed where, you know, you have to take the medical, the STD, yeah, where one of the partners has an STD, where the beneficiary has an STD and the petitioner doesn't know about it.
yeah.
On the
As
medical.
an attorney, what do you do afterwards? Like, how can you
mean
save
after I
your
melt?
case?
After I melt? Because I don't,
After,
you know, at that point.
do you come back?
Yeah, how do I come back? I try to manage the situation, calm everybody down, not to keep talking, not to disclose you know, just try to contain it and be like, okay, whatever you need, government, send me a letter and then we'll deal with it. Do you know what I'm saying? It's not like it's something that's going to be, you can negotiate at that point. The same thing with arrest. I mean, even we in our office have a public record search program in our office, and sometimes people are arrested by different aliases, different identities, and it's not disclosed. And then you go to the interview or something comes up and you're like, you know, oh my goodness, there's a whole nother human issues that are going on here that we're
But
not.
why? Like, I mean, I understand someone not wanting to tell their spouse, but like, wouldn't you tell your lawyer?
You know what? In all fairness, in my experience, I think that some people really, I don't know if I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, but I feel like there's so much anxiety that goes on with whatever it is that they went on with, and it just completely shuts them down. So it's like they don't communicate it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like out of sight, out of mind. And so it gets very, you know, taxing to try to pull out information that it's not being delivered to you. I don't necessarily think it's intentional or malicious all the time that it's not disclosed, but I do think that they just think that if they don't say it, nobody's going to know about it.
Right. But like, I mean, in the case of like, uh, okay, so you go to the embassy and you have your interview or something, and
You know what's, sorry to cut you off. You know what's a big problem at the embassy when the interviews, when it comes to this? It's when somebody has been previously married before, and that marriage was not either disclosed or terminated properly. That's a big problem. The lack
so
of termination of the previous, so to do the K-1, you have to be what's called, you know, be determined to be legally single, legally free and single. But, you know, if you marry someone in another location and you don't think that you need to disclose it, or you marry someone and then you get divorced where you're not living in that place, you know, there's all these issues that come up to determine whether or not either applicant is legally single. And that's one of the big issues that I see when I get like K-1 denials when it comes to these types of cases. It's crazy.
yeah, I think we briefly talked about that before, because you said that in order to get a divorce, in order for the divorce to count as a divorce, one person has to be living in the jurisdiction where the marriage took place, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. But in that case, like, okay, so you go to but at that point, I mean, you get a rejection before you got to the
So
interview.
no, that's the thing. No, you can make it through. The service center can still approve your I-129F in error because they didn't do their job. They send it to the embassy, and then the embassy checks out everything and then determines that there's an issue and then sends the I-129F back to the service center.
Oh, wow. That's like the nightmare
Yeah, it is
scenario.
a nightmare. It is a nightmare.
Oh my God, after waiting, in our case, we waited over a year, you know, and at the time that I had applied, they said, you know, 6 to 9 months, then COVID and everything. I can't imagine waiting all that time only to get rejected. It's just like, and then you have to, and in that case, you'd have to start all over again.
Yeah,
There'd be no way to correct it, right?
you have to fix what the marital status issue is, and then you have to reapply. You don't just jump back into the line. You got to start it all over again.
Yeah.
We have a viewer that was said that they've been pending for a year. What would you recommend for
Which type of case? Fiancé? I-129?
Fiancé?
So I'm a big advocate of sending inquiries and notices to service centers, contacting Congress people, just calling, pushing the case. I mean, we try to do that as much as we can for all the petitions that we have. And when people call me and they speak to me about trying to push for their case, I tell them the same thing. You know, if they can write letters to the service centers, if they can contact their congressperson, if they can try to put a request for expedite, if they meet that criteria,